Looks like we're almost live. All right, looks like we're finally live on Facebook. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So, tonight we're going to be talking about loss and grieving that loss and what the process is, how to get through that, how to move through that in a faster way. And this can be a loss that happens in your personal life or even in your professional life, because that kind of stuff does happen and it still does have an emotional effect on you. So being able to go through this process, understand the grieving process and how to move through that so that you are able to get through it quicker and be able to manage the emotions that come up along the way. So if this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach, and I help people deal with difficult emotions like depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts even. I do this by sharing my own personal experience, how I've been able to move through these emotions and the things. Oh, I'm so sorry that you lost your dad last April, Chris. Um, Anniversaries can also be a really challenging time, especially if that was just a year ago. That can be really difficult and it can bring up a lot of emotions. So I'm not sure if you're experiencing that, but this is going to be a perfect talk for you tonight. So please stick around. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask those in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to address that. So let's talk about the grieving process. So before we get into that, we'll talk about the different types of losses. And it can be extremely difficult. So in the case of like when I was 17, and I attempted suicide because of a breakup in the relationship, and I didn't know how to manage those emotions. And everybody just kept telling me it was going to get better. There's other fish in the sea. You're only 17. You should be able to move on. Oh my God, are you still crying about this? Like, what is wrong with you? And all of those kind of things kept coming up, and I honestly did not know how to move through that. And it can be really, really painful. And it can also be painful when you lose a loved one through death, whether that is something that you've been expecting or not expecting, and it happens suddenly. It can be the loss of a pet. And in the terms of professional, it can be loss of your job, loss of your career, loss of other coworkers. I went through a really tough time after there was a massive layoff. The first one was challenging because of the volume of people that got laid off, and there was over 700 people that got laid off. So obviously that had a huge impact on the overall morale of the company. And then when the second wave of layoffs happened again, that one hit a little bit more personally, because there were some people that were really good, close friends of mine, people that I had looked up to, admired, and respected. And that severely impacted me because, first of all, because of my past background and my previous the way I grew up, the trauma that I've experienced, it is really difficult sometimes for me to create a connection, form a bond, and actually learn to trust somebody. Now, that may not seem realistic because I tend to be pretty open and friendly, especially in a work environment. Where I will talk with people, I'll open up, and because I share things at a pretty vulnerable level, people think that like I'm, just open and honest, but when I'm in pain or when I'm dealing with difficult emotions, I don't let most people in, and that is a protection mechanism. So, and I also typically don't allow other people to give to me. So if I allow you to know what my emotions are, the painful ones and the difficult ones, and if I allow you to actually give to me, then you're pretty friggin' special. I gotta tell you that much. Okay, really, really special because I don't open up easily. So, had a moment tonight, I didn't see it coming. Oh, what kind of challenges did you have, Chris? If you're okay to share with that, I can talk to that. So while you're typing, I'll continue on. So whether it's personal or professional, there's a whole process to grieving that you need to understand that there's different stages. And understanding and being aware of those stages helps you move through those emotions at a faster rate. And it's not so painful because if you don't understand this process, I know for myself, before I understood what this process was, it just felt like it was going to last forever and these feelings were never going to change. And that led me to attempting to take my life because I didn't see an end to the pain. And now that I understand this process, it makes me much more aware of, oh, okay, this is what stage I'm at. Now, keep in mind that these aren't like perfectly linear. Human beings can go through stuff and you may take a couple of steps back, go forward, all of that kind of stuff. Someone said, someone said, have you not gone beyond your pain yet? Yeah, and see, when other people say that, that tells me a lot about the fact that they haven't done their emotional work. And often what ends up happening is they want you to hurry up and get over it. So in a way, it's a sign of selfishness. Now it's pretty low because I'm sure they also don't want to see you hurting. They're not doing that from a bad place, but at the same time, your sad emotions, your difficult emotions, or however you're dealing with this, it's causing a reaction in them, and they don't know how to help you. And then people end up getting frustrated and they tell you to get over things and they tell you, why haven't you moved beyond this already? And let me tell you, the grieving process is for you to go through. It's something that you cannot rush. And sometimes we even get frustrated with ourselves. We're like, why the hell am I not over this? And you may go to different coping mechanisms or strategies that you've used that aren't really that effective, and it ends up causing more problems, and it can actually delay the process, right? And one of the other reasons why we tend to stay stuck in that, along with not knowing what the grieving process is we are in environments where it keeps reopening the wound, right? So it keeps triggering certain memories, you keep going through certain cycles, and it just kind of keeps, the wound can't properly heal. Also, if you haven't done the inner work and you kind of skim along surface level, then what ends up happening is even though the wound heals, it's like it wasn't cleaned out properly, so it gets reinfected, and then other stuff will bubble up and it becomes irritating, annoying, all of those kind of things. And it can be really sensitive, and then somebody says one little thing and you feel like you're back to square one. So let's talk about, I'm not sure if that helps you or not, Chris. Please let me know if you found that helpful, or if you still have more questions, and I'll be happy to talk about that. So the first stage of the grieving process is denial. A lot of times we are shocked by it. We can't believe that it's happening. We maybe think that the relationship's going to get back together. And this can, so I had one circumstance that it impacted me to the point where it wasn't even my relationship breakup, but I still had to go through a grieving process when a good friend of mine went through a divorce, and I spent a lot of time with them when I was single, and they became like family to me. And so when they were at the time, they were the best example of what a healthy relationship looked like. And so for me, when they actually divorced, it was actually devastating for me. And it was really hard to see them go through that because I loved both of them. And I was like, the funny thing is, as a kid, even though there was divorce and there were all kinds of breakups, I didn't have that feeling of being divided where I loved both people. And that was really, really hard to go through and process those emotions because when I was growing up in childhood, I didn't know my real dad. And then all the other men that my mom picked were fairly abusive, varying degrees of abusive. Some they were sexually abusive, some were just violent and drunk and all of that kind of stuff. And there were fights. And so every time there was a divorce or a breakup or anything like that, I was actually relieved. It's like, good, they're gone, right? And I saw them as the problem and not realizing that that when other people are going through this situation until I was older and I actually loved both people and that I actually had that experience of what most children go through when they love both parents and that split happens. It can be devastating, right? So, just going back, I said I feel like he didn't see me succeed. Oh, that your dad, when he passed away, he didn't get to see you succeed. Is that it, Chris? So while I'm waiting for Chris to respond, so going back to the denial process, the grieving process, denial is that first step, and we can deny that our feelings, we can deny that's even having an impact. So example of being at work when there were a bunch of layoffs, like I said, the first round wasn't as difficult because we knew it was coming. We knew in some ways this was actually an opportunity, a gift to get rid of some people that maybe had been with the company too long, people that were difficult to deal with, but not enough. They were doing just enough to get by, but they were never people that you could actually count on. So that first round of layoffs, it was easy to deny that this had any impact on us because, um, it's like, it's not that big of a deal, I'm fine, and those kind of things can end up happening. So denial is that first stage. We don't really believe it's actually happening, or we don't believe that it's having an impact on us. And so once you come out of denial, because denial stands for don't even know that I'm lying. And so when you come out of that stage, the next stage that you're going to go through is feeling anger, right? Yes, I'm 50 soon and feel like I've not succeeded career-wise. Well, happy birthday soon, that you're going to be 50, Chris. And you who feel like you haven't succeeded career-wise, okay? What would succeeding career-wise look like to you? And while I'm waiting for that answer, I'll continue on with the training. So anger is the next stage. So once you become aware that the loss has actually impacted you, whether that's the loss of a relationship, loss through death or a loved one, that family member, any of that kind of stuff, you may feel anger, especially in cases where there's been abuse. Sometimes what ends up happening for some people is they get a flood of memories that they weren't safe enough to feel or look at until the abuser was actually gone. And that can be really confusing when we have all of these feelings come up. Some people, they go through a lot of anger in the grieving process because maybe the loved one that left, or maybe the partner that's left, or whatever. What ends up happening is they have a mess of somebody else's life to clean up. Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine, Chris, it's difficult to explain in text form. How do you feel about it? Like, is it you that is feeling like you haven't succeeded in your career, or is that other people telling you that you should have succeeded a little bit more? Maybe that could help me a little bit to kind of guide you. Um, so these angry feelings will come up, and sometimes we may cut people off. We may start fighting with family members so many times. And you see this in funeral homes too, like when a loved one passes away. All of a sudden, people that were really, really loving to one another start fighting against each other. They start fighting over money. They start fighting over who's doing what. And what we have to remember in this stage is that people's emotions are heightened, and we have to allow a little bit of grace, not allow any abuse, obviously, but allow a little bit of grace as we ourselves go through the grieving process, and so do the other people. Your dad said, I'm a success because I have 3 kids, but I took on 3 more as your own. Wow, 6 kids, that is a handful. So your dad said that you're a success just because you have kids? How do you feel about that, Chris? Do you feel like you having 6 kids is a success to you? Is that something? Because I think that's amazing. That's a lot of work to take on. So, going back to anger and going through those emotions, the next stage that we go through is bargaining. And so, this is where we maybe bargain with ourselves. So, one of the ways that this happens is we start going back and forth in our head. We kind of go between our head and our heart, and there's like this whole battle that goes on, which actually fits in with some of the artwork that I've done. So I do some art therapy stuff. There we go. You can see it now. There we go. So, and clearly this isn't like, Picasso kind of art. It's just kind of, I'm better at the more abstract, but when I start doing this kind of stuff, this is more a personal process, and it's just a snapshot picture of what I'm dealing with emotionally. So this is representing, sometimes it's like we feel like we have this battle that goes in our mind between our head and our heart, right? Because our heart wants one thing, and our heart is the one that's hurting and in pain of the loss. And then our mind just kind of like, let's get over this. Come on, let's do this. Let's forget about this. We don't have time to feel all these feelings. And so there's this battle back and forth. And I think this often happens more in the breakup of a relationship, especially if the person's still alive. We kind of go back and forth, and we start bargaining in our own minds of like, well, maybe if I had done this, then this wouldn't happen. Or maybe if I had done that, it wouldn't happen. Maybe I could, like, we kind of go over and over and over. And this can happen too with like the death of a loved one, right? We can start to feel all kinds of different feelings and think, oh, if I had said something sooner, if I had done something sooner, if I, you know, my uncle, when he passed away with cirrhosis of the liver, we often thought, it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't have made him so many drinks. Maybe I should have been harder on him when he was drinking too much. All kinds of stuff goes back and forth in our mind. And this is like the middle stage, right? You're you're at the like top of the mountain where you're going to tip over to where you're at the other side, right? Same journey he had, second marriage, and being a father to all the kids. Okay, so your dad was saying that you were a success because it's similar to what he went through, where he not only had his kids, but he took on other people's kids. And to him, that was a success. So he says that you're a success as well because of that. Am I understanding that correctly, Chris? Okay. So this bargaining phase is where we kind of teeter-totter back and forth between our head and our heart, trying to make sense of what has happened, to process the loss. And this can cause us to feel really out of balance when we're in this stage. And it's what you need to understand when you're in this stage is what you're trying to do is grasp for some sense of control. Because the situation, this loss, even if it's something that you chose, like maybe you chose to walk away from a relationship, maybe you chose to walk away from a job, and you find yourself doubting, right? You have some uncertainty, you have some doubt, you have all these questions. In this stage, there will be a lot of what ifs and what could have, what should have, all these kind of things go on. And just know that this is the middle point, and you're about to tip over to the next stage, which is sadness. Because at some point, you get to the point where all of this mental jumping through hoops, teeter-tottering back and forth between your head and your heart, you kind of realize that no matter what, whether you come up with a perfectly logical, sound argument as to why this happened, right? Maybe you were, because let's talk about the example of when there were layoffs, right? There were all those people that lost their jobs. And I remember thinking to myself, especially in the second round, I'm thinking, why did I had survivor's guilt. Like I still had a job, I still had income and all of that kind of stuff. And some people that I looked up to, admired and respected, they were part of the layoffs. And some of this stuff wasn't handled very well. I remember in the first round, one of the HR managers that had to go through and give everybody their package and read everything for them after they had finished doing all of those layoffs, and the emotional drain from just doing that, being, like people would joke and say things like, oh, you're the Grim Reaper, huh? Right? And just like mean things, and realizing that this person, although it's part of their job and it's something that's necessary that they have to do, it's still very painful to let people go, right? Even if you're telling people that you get to stay, right? Because that happened at another company where everybody got pulled into the room, and some people were being let go and some people were being kept, and nobody knew, and it was like a game of Russian roulette, right? You didn't know, am I going in the room and is the bullet in the chamber for this one, right? And I remember crying and being upset even before I went in, thinking that I was going to be one of the ones that get laid off. And I wasn't. And they're like, are you crazy? No, Tina, you're not getting laid off. We need you too much. And I'm like, well, then that tipped over to this whole feeling sad, because it's like I was losing some of my friends that were on the team. They were good workers. In the second layoffs that happened, people that I had looked up to, admired, respected, and they worked hard. One guy that was, he had been working for the company for like pretty much since his late teens, early 20s, and he ended up getting laid off, and he sacrificed so much for that company. He was he was there at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. most days of the week, and then he'd be working late until 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it took. Like, this guy was a whatever it takes kind of mentality, hard worker, disciplined, organized, top performer, and he got laid off. Not because of yes, he was a bit vocal. He was a bit difficult, no doubt about that. But he had also softened over the years, right? But the thing is they let him go mostly because of his years of service, and the payout would have been way too much. So this was an opportunity to get rid of him without having to wait until it's his full package, right? So they could include it as part of that. But that had a huge fallout and a huge effect on the rest of the team, because when you do that and that person is such a high performer, such like everybody in the business knew this guy's name, knew who he was, all of that kind of stuff, and he was admired and respected because he got results. And if that guy was cannon fodder, right, from the layoffs, then what kind of difference would our work make, right? And no care or attention was given to the process of the people that were left behind, even through the first wave of layoffs and the second wave of layoffs. Those are emotions that affect the everybody that's left behind. And I know they gave some care and career guidance and helped the people get replacement jobs, and that stuff was communicated. So I mean, it's not like the company was completely heartless or anything, right? So but there is this emotional component, and it does have an impact and a cost on the business. So it's important to be able to understand what it is and be able to address those things, and to help people rebuild and move through those emotions faster, right? I might have explained it wrong. I think he meant my children are my pride. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, Chris, how do you feel about that? Like, what is the question that you have around that? Is it more like, because I know you started off saying that you didn't feel successful in your career, and then your dad giving you feedback of because you have kids and all of that kind of stuff, right? So I'm just trying to understand where you're at with this of being able to um, deal with those feelings. Like, do you feel he is right, or do you feel that you don't agree with him? So maybe help guide me in that, and then I can help answer some. How do you measure success? That is a great, great question, and I'll probably do a more in-depth training, right? See, this is where inner work is so important. Um, Let me ask you this, Chris. How did you measure success before? Hi, Surfer. So that's important because there's various ways to measure success, right? And for some people, it's success in their career. Some people, it's success about how much money they have. Some people, it's the car they drive, the stuff that they can accumulate. To them, that's success. Other people, it's more a personal kind of fulfillment. Success is being able to have freedom, to be able to do whatever you want. Some people, success is feeling like they're always being challenged, and it's that process of growing and learning and having something to conquer as part of the success process. So let me ask you this, Chris. How do you measure success? Are you measuring success the same way your father is, with being able to have the kids and being able to do that, or is career more important for you? And I mean, they can both be important, but it's kind of like, if you had to rank them in order, which would have a higher priority, and that can change in different phases of your life, right? So you can think at one time, success would be um, having a corporate job, having a rich social life, going out, meeting new people, traveling. Like, it can be very different in your 20s compared to maybe in your 30s, where maybe you're focused more on building a family, buying a house, and all of those kind of things. Success can also mean, not only just buying your first house, maybe now you wanted to buy a brand new house, one that was completely yours. You picked all the finishing. I know at one time that was a huge success for me to be able to achieve that, and I did that. And so at one time, being able to work for the corporate company that I had worked for was a huge success when I got that. And then I ended up leaving that. So being able to leave that role to come online to start learning different things, it changes. And especially once you achieve the goals, success ends up, we're like, oh, I was so busy trying to get after this. I was so busy chasing this goal. And then when I got it, I didn't feel like I thought I was going to feel, right? It's like the house. So it's so funny because we had to wait over a year for the house to be built. And I remember one of the first things that I had said when I got in there, because we had picked it off of a floor plan, and we were like, okay, well, this was, I knew the minute we got the keys for the house, that I'm like, this is not going to be our last house. We'll move again. This is too small because I thought it was bigger than what we had, but it was too small for the vision I had for the future, right? Because that had changed as I was waiting for the house to be built. I had some other plans. Now, none of those have ended up panning out, and we eventually sold the house, and I think that was a good thing for the timing. But yeah, so material things are not how I imagine success, right? So how do you manage or imagine success? For some people, success is being able to spend more free time with their family. Success would be being able to make a full-time income with part-time hours, right? So it depends on what is success for you. Maybe it's to retire early. For other people, it's like, I don't care about retiring. I don't plan on retiring. I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, right? Maybe that's something. So we all have to define our own definition of what success is, and that can vary between relationships, health, wealth, whatever it is. We can break it down in various areas, right? So you have to figure out what exactly is important to you, and then be able to prioritize those of how are you going to move forward to be able to achieve those goals, right? And then you move along that way, right? And that can often happen as we're going through the grieving process. We go through all of this questioning because we've had something removed, and now we have this space within our heart, within our soul, within our minds, that we're struggling to be able to shift into the new way. And so we can go through, this is where the sadness kicks in, of the loss of, like, it's always hardest when you have, like, first Christmas, first birthday, whatever, when you are dealing with that loss, right? You might look back, it's like, well, a year ago at this time I was doing this, and now I'm here in this space, and it's different and it's difficult, and you may feel sadness, you may feel nostalgia. If you feel nostalgia, you're probably further along in the grieving process, because nostalgia means you kind of are looking back at the past, and you're seeing it in, actually, almost like with rose-colored glasses, this pink filter of it's like when somebody passes away, they end up only remembering the good things about them, and they only speak about the good things, right? Um, oh, can you hear me now, Chris? You're back? Yeah, so you can feel this whole sadness of no, it's actually a good thing when you get into that sadness stage, because you're that much closer to acceptance. So when you're in this sadness stage, it's important to be able to allow yourself a lot of tears, a lot of maybe not feeling as high energy. This is where you need to give yourself a whole lot more grace, a whole lot more comfort, a lot more care, and being able to have like a tool belt built out so that you have the correct supports in place to be able to help you through this process, because it can be easy to get lost and it feels like you're being pulled under, right? But just know that you're almost to that breakthrough piece where you can actually move through the grief, the sadness, and you get to a point where now it's at an acceptance, right? Of a knowing that you can't change what has happened, you can't fix it, you can't, you're over the shoulda, woulda, couldas, you're over the crying of it, and you can look back on it and see it for a valuable piece, a valuable chapter in your life, right? And there's a sense of gratitude almost, of knowing and looking at that piece of our life and seeing the gifts of it, rather than being stuck in the pain of loss and grieving and stuff like that. So that getting to that acceptance level is really, really important. That means you wouldn't change it, you're not trying to change it, you just are okay with it. You're like, it's not great. Maybe you, like, if it's like, say you broke your leg or something, and now you have a limp, right? It's like, it's not ideal, it's not what you wanted, you never would have asked for that to happen. However, you are now no longer letting that hold you back from what you need to do next. And now, once you're at this acceptance stage, now you can start looking forward again. This is the stage where if you've, it rolls around, it's another anniversary, it's another Christmas, another holiday, whatever, without that person, or without that job, or without, you know, and you don't look back and feel a lot of pain. You look back and maybe you smile and you remember some of the good times, and maybe there's a little bit of sadness, but it's very brief, and you're able to kind of be present and forward looking, right? And you're not trying to change what happened in the past. You're not struggling with wanting it to be different, right? So acceptance is a very freeing stage of the grieving process, right? And this can come up from time to time, of these phases come up, and be aware of certain anniversaries or special memories and things like that. So, yeah. All your kids are grown, so you're at a crossroad to figure out the next chapter for my wife and I. Yeah, okay. And here's some of the stuff. So if you're in that stage where a lot of times we look back, especially if it's a loss of someone who's still around, right? You may, or even a job, right? Like a job that you used to work at. Sometimes you may find yourself like missing that person, missing that place, that job, and it's because it's not so much the person or the place that we're missing. Part of it is we're missing who we were back then. back when there was a sense of innocence, a simpler time, right? And this is where nostalgia comes in, right? Where you're looking at the past and you're like wanting to, you miss that piece of you. And one of the ways to help progress the grieving process and to be able to move through that is to identify what were the pieces of that you really enjoyed. What did you like about either that past or when you had kids, and now they've left because they've grown up and that's a normal part of things, and but you still have this maybe empty nest syndrome kind of thing, right? That's happening, and it's like, well, this has been my identity for so long. So now what? Now what do I do? So what you want to do is look at what did you enjoy about having kids, right? What did you enjoy about those aspects of when they were around? Maybe you enjoyed it that you were busy, or maybe you had an excuse to play, right? Because a lot of times adults don't play unless the kids are around, and now that the kids aren't around, they stop doing like little things at holidays, they stop trying to make things exciting, right? Because they were always doing it for the kids, right? They were always doing things for the kids, they were doing things for their significant other, all of that kind of stuff, right? So if you're single and you were in a relationship and now you're not, and you're like, now, oh man, what do I do now? And this sucks because, well, what would you do if that person was still here? What would you be trying to plan? What would you try to do, right? And then we start to do that for ourselves, right? You know, so if maybe the kids were around, you would cook different dinners, you would plan trips or events or certain things that you would want to do. Maybe they were, maybe, you know, driving them to sports teams and, you know, whatever practices and stuff like that. Now, this is where how you can fill some of that gap that you might be feeling is to start doing some of those things for you as if you were one of your kids, right? So if there's any sports events or anything that you want to take up, you can start doing those kind of things. This is a time for you to develop new hobbies, try out new things, go to new places. All of those kind of things are really important to identify what you liked from when they were around, the things that you would have done, and then start finding ways to incorporate that in your day-to-day so that you can take the best of what was there, especially if you've gone through the grieving process and now you don't have the pain, but you still hang on to the best, and you use that to build the foundation for what it is that you want for the future, right? And if you're at a point where you're not quite sure, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. It's like, I mean, I don't need to like do these crafts or whatever it is that you used to do. It's like, well, I don't feel like cooking a great big meal, you know. So it's starting to figure out what can you do, and start asking yourself that. It's like, if the kids were here, what would I be doing, right? If my boyfriend or if my girlfriend was here, or I just knew that they were on vacation or they were away for a week and they were coming back, what would I be doing knowing that they were coming back? And that is how you start taking those next steps, right? Sometimes also too, changing your environment. I know you were saying that your kids are grown, so you need to figure out the next chapter for your wife, you and your wife, right? So, so going away and being able to kind of go, because the act of going to just even a different environment, so it could be going to a restaurant in the next town over kind of thing, right? Or going to a restaurant that you've never been before. Maybe it's in your town, but you've always wanted to try it. So doing that kind of thing, that small act, gives you a sense of adventure, gives you a sense of novelty in a safe way that can help expand your mind, allow you to see things from a different perspective, right? One way, if you're not sure what to do, allowing yourself like a free-form brainstorming session kind of thing, where you even write down like silly ideas. Maybe if you've got a whiteboard, or you and your wife take down a piece of paper and write down like 10 silly things that you can do now that the kids are not, that the kids are grown and you don't have the kids around. So writing those down, it's like, hey, there's nobody in the house now, so we can walk around naked or whatever it is, right? You can come up with silly different things that you can do. Maybe you can now have like, I don't know, water gun fights or Nerf gun fights, right? And leave a note of like, you know, he walks in the door and there's a Nerf gun and suit up kind of thing. Something crazy. I don't know. Whatever it is, start by writing down the silly stuff and putting that down of what could be possible. And then ask each other, what would you like to do next, right? And maybe it's a time of you give yourself a little bit of time to explore new things, right? And say, you know what, because maybe you're not sure. Maybe there's so many options that you're not sure. Or maybe one partner does have a particular idea and it's like, okay, if you're all right going along with that, then you do that and then ask yourselves what's next, right? So I'm not sure if that's helping you or not, Chris, but you can let me know, right? Because, yeah, it's the unknown. It's like, well, who are we? What's our next evolution? What's the next thing for us, right? Not good at math, but I was with kids, mom since 1992 till 2005. Been with my wife now since. Okay. So if you're not good at math and that is something that you want to improve, maybe take a look at different tools that you can do to build your, you have a new wife. Well, congratulations. So you can look at tools if that's something that you want to be able to do. Now you have some of the freedom because you don't have all of your mental and physical bandwidth pouring into the kids. And this is a chance for you to go, okay, well, what does getting good at math look like to you? Oh, okay, you're with your new wife for 13 years. Okay. Well, still, congratulations, lucky 13, right? Thank you, Stella. So you can go through these stages, and then when you get to that acceptance phase, that's when you can start looking forward. And this is your chance to start to explore new things and start to create new memories. And to be able to write that next chapter, and give yourself permission to not have all the answers, right? And I know that can be really challenging because as a parent, I'm sure you had to have all the answers, right? And if you didn't know, you had to find out pretty soon, right? So this can be a big shift for us when we're so used to pouring into others. And now we have to start asking ourselves, well, what do I want? It's like, Chris, when was the last time you really asked yourself, what is it that you want, right? And that can be a really tough question to answer. That can be really, really hard to answer that question. Do you find that hard, or do you know what it is that you want? Do you have some ideas? And I think for most of us, the hardest loss to grieve is the loss of our identity and who we were in that situation, whether that's a relationship, maybe I know I've had friends that they went through a grieving process when their first parent had died when they were really young, and then when they were older, their second parent died. And for them, it was now adopting this new identity of like, she's like, I'm an orphan now, right? You know, she was older, but at the same time, she felt like an orphan, like, I don't have any parents anymore. So that was a hard transition for her. I guess I measure success on the success of my children because they're all French teachers. Oh, that's good. Right. And see, this is, so even that is still like this is part of the grieving process because it's like, okay, well, I based all of my measures of success on how well my kids are doing. And now you have to let go of that, right? And all through life, we have all these mini steps of letting go of things. Like, and we always become so focused on what's the next thing, getting, accumulating, and stuff like that. And as we get older, it's not so much about getting and accumulating. It's like, oh, I have all of this stuff. And so sometimes success is getting rid of things and letting go of things and making room for the new things, right? You're 50 and you've only worked 8 years consistently. Right. So is getting back into the workforce something that you're interested in doing, Chris? Because 50 is still young, especially in this day and age, right? Before 50 was like, oh, you can retire, right? It's like, no. It's like some of the greats, they didn't even start until their 50s, and that's when they built businesses. I think Colonel Sanders and uh, what's the guy that founded McDonald's? I think he started in his 50s as well. So yeah, it's definitely a whole new transition for you. And I'm really excited for you. And that excitement can sometimes feel scary as you're going through these phases, right? Um, oh, yes, as far as career progression, I feel like I failed. Okay, you've how do you feel like you failed? Is because you didn't have a career in terms of where you were getting monetary compensation? Because I don't know, being a parent and devoting your time and dedication to your children is a career. And sometimes it's a matter of shifting your perspective to seeing what you did there. Because I mean, the amount of time management skills, the project management type skills that you would have to have. Um, hey Moab, I'm in Canada. Where are you? So you can have all of these different skills, and just because you aren't being monetarily compensated doesn't mean that you have failed, right? Unless you only see success as a monetary um, evaluation of success, right? because I can tell you being a successful parent is one of the most important things that you could do. And loving your kids and giving them a strong foundation is something that is extremely powerful, because there's so many people that did not have that. So maybe some of the things that you can do is help younger parents and be able to help them, by knowing that they're not alone, giving them some of the things that you wish you had support on as you were raising your kids. Um, that could be something that you could focus on as a career, and you're not a failure. You have a ton of experience in that, and being able to help and support other people that are going through that is something that would be extremely valuable. So I don't know if that is something that you've ever considered. That's where people say you had the hardest job and you did a great job. Yeah, it's definitely one of those thankless jobs, right? Because everybody just expects it, and it's kind of like when I was in band, I remember the teacher telling us that because one of the kids was concerned that nobody was paying attention to them while they were playing, right? And it's like, why are people just talking and amongst themselves, and why aren't they looking at us while we're playing? And the teacher said to them, it was like, no, if people are stopping and paying attention, then it's because we're not doing a good job. If we're doing a good job, it's kind of like it just goes on in the background. It's not recognized as much, right? I was the stay-at-home dad from the beginning. Oh, wow, that is a challenge, being a stay-at-home dad. That in and of itself is a huge success. Huge success, right? Because that means you're also one of the pioneers, because there's not many dads that stay at home with their kids and do all of those kind of things. Yeah, and see, if we focus on what other people measure as success, this is where we have to internalize it and go, okay, well, what does success mean for you, right? What does that look like for you, right? Can you give yourself credit for being a stay-at-home dad and taking all of that stuff on? That is not something that is easy, especially when you had 6 kids, right? That's a lot. Some people can't do that with one. You could just go on TikTok too and look at all the the wives that are like single moms, and they're like trying to deal with their ex that wants the kids but doesn't actually know how to take care of them. So the fact that you took all that stuff on, you knew how to take care of them, and that, I guess it's how people measure it. Yeah, for 28 years. Yeah, it's not an easy job, that's for sure. So congratulations on being able to do that. It's a matter of, it's like, okay, what would you say to a mom that was doing it, or another dad that was doing it, that was doing the same thing? Like, what would you point out to support them, right? Yeah, it's definitely time for you now, and you and your wife, and what it is that you want to come next. What does that look like for you? And being able to like brainstorm out and put down silly things, because that'll help open up your mind and remove roadblocks to what's possible, right? So being able to do that is something that's really important, right? And taking up those hobbies. Maybe it's like, okay, you can look online for apps to help you get better at math, if that's something that you felt. I know you mentioned that, so if that's something that you wanted to change, now you can kind of go, okay, well, how quickly can I master this? But love and support doesn't pay the bills. Yeah, no kidding, right? So that being said, you still have to look at, it's like, okay, well, do you still want to, did you want to, now that your kids are gone, still work with kids? Or did you want to do something completely different now, right? So this is where you have to go, is this part of the identity that I had before where I'm the person that takes care of the kids? Is that something that you're wanting to carry into the new version of yourself? That you're still taking care of kids now, but now it's not your kids, it's somebody else's kids, or you're helping other parents take care of their kids, kind of thing, right? So this is where you have to kind of look at what were the parts of the identity that you had before? What did you love about that? What kind of things do you want to carry forward? And then find new ways to do the same thing, but in a different structure, right? Definitely not too late to pick a new career. Definitely not too late. Unless you deem it is. If you feel it is, then I can't argue with that. But I know for myself, you know what was so funny, Chris? When I was in my 30s, or I hadn't even turned 30 yet, I remember complaining to a friend of mine because I had dropped out of school and high school, and I went back and I finished, at that time I hadn't finished my high school degree, and I was stuck in this mindset of like, oh, I'm a high school dropout. I'll never amount to anything. But meanwhile, I was very successful in my transportation and logistics career. And I remember her saying, if it bothers you that much, then do something about it. And so I went back to night school and I took a bunch of advanced courses so that I could, because my next step was to get into university. And I wanted to do that. And so I took the required courses so that I could apply to university because I wanted to go back and be a therapist. And so I did all the work. I got my high school diploma. I finished that out, and then I went to university. I applied, I got in, and I had to brush up on all of my math skills. Oh my God, that was so hard to kind of get back up to speed, right? But I wasn't even 30 yet, and I kept thinking, oh, I'm too old for this now, and it's too late for me, and I can't change careers. I'm stuck in transport and logistics. And the funny thing is the very act of going through that and going through and getting into my first year university and my psych courses and stuff like that, and then realizing that this isn't going to give me the return on investment, and by the time I finish all this, it's going to, because I was still working full time while I was going to university, and so I was like, I'm going to do this, get all this training. It's going to take me probably 10 years by the time I get this, and I'm going to come out with my diploma or my degree, and it's going to end up costing me way more, and I'm going to come out making less than I am now. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not doing that. So I focused on continuing to learn and educate myself within the transport industry, and I started asking the managers I was working with to take additional training so that I could learn and grow within the company. And so I took advantage of any training courses that were available, and I've always been a lifelong learner. So it's never too late unless you decide it's too late. You were a school bus driver up to last April, trained to be a truck driver, and then failed the test 3 times now. Okay. Why do you think that you failed the test 3 times now, Chris? if you've taken the test 3 times, I assume that you're pretty determined to become a truck driver. Um, or is it something that you're not really that interested in, but you're thinking it's something that you have to do? Right. Because there's lots of different ways to make money. So if that's not something that you truly want to do, that there's all kinds of different ways that you can make money. Absolutely. So it doesn't have to be limited to that if that is not something you want. If it is something that you want and you've now failed 3 times, then you have to look at what are the areas. Is it the same areas that's causing you to fail, or is it new things that are happening, right? Went to Ontario truck driving school. My grade was 97, and then you failed the road test. Okay. Why do you think that you failed the road test? Is it more nerves? Did you get, because I know that happened to me when I was taking computer programming when I went back to school. I went back to college after the company that I was working for had gone bankrupt. So that was definitely a huge loss. That was also a big financial hit that hit pretty hard because they owed me like $15,000, and I was like, damn. And I didn't get that, and and I was the bigger breadwinner of the family too, right? Well, last time your time was backing up and it timed out. Okay, so you ran out of time to pass the test. Do you feel like if you had had more time that you would have been able to actually pass it? Because sometimes it can be a blessing in disguise if we don't get what we want, right? Timed out by 20 seconds. Ouch. Ouch. Oh, my heart goes out to you, Chris. Damn. So can you like take the test again? How soon can you take it? Because I mean, if you can take the test again, then is that something that you want to do? How do you feel about this? Okay, so there's a cost to every time you try, right? Yeah. Okay, so is there a limit on how many times you can try, or is it just the cost that's a barrier? No limit on the times? Okay. And if it's just the cost, okay, great. So do you have the ability to actually continue the practice so that you can monitor and shave that time so that you have enough of a buffer that you're not going to run out of time? Because if that's the only thing that held you back, then do you have the ability to practice so that you can get faster at it? And then take the test again so that you don't run out of that and you don't waste another $300. So bottom line is my calling is driving and working with people. Okay. Okay, so sounds like this is something that you definitely want to do. Do you have that ability to practice, or do you think you could just take the test now, knowing how to shave that time off so that you can get it done within the time constraints? Like, have you figured out why you were like off by that 20 seconds? While I'm waiting for Chris to respond, I'm just going to add in here. Guys, I do upload the replays, so if you popped in late and you want to be able to catch up on the replay, I upload all of the live trainings on my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. You can definitely go check that out there. And then make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you get notified when I've uploaded a video. Okay, so guys, I'm going to end the Facebook, stay on TikTok, and we'll continue with Chris's questions here. Okay, have a great day, guys. Bye.